Good afternoon, boys and girls. I'm Tonya Arnesen, Senior Pastor of Jackson First United Methodist Church, and this is Children's Story Time for Thursday, June 4th, 2020. We've been reading together through the Jesus Storytime Bible, and we see how every story in the whole Bible points in some way to Jesus. We've been hearing about some of Jesus's ancestors from long ago. Today we're going to hear about Moses, and the title of this story is God to the Rescue. There's a picture of Moses right there. Joseph and his brothers grew old and died, but their children's children stayed on in Egypt when they became a very large family. Later on, a new king began to rule. But this Pharaoh didn't remember Joseph, and he didn't like God's big family. He made them into his slaves, and he beat them and made them work harder and harder and harder. God's people cried out for God to rescue them, and God heard them. He remembered his promise to Abraham that he would always look after his people, and he would find a way to set them free. One day, Moses was looking after sheep when something caught his eye. A bush was behaving very oddly. It was flickering with flames, but its leaves weren't burning up. He took a closer look. "Moses!" boomed a big voice. Moses leapt back. The bush was talking to them. "I have heard my people's cries," God said. "I have seen their tears, so I have come down to rescue them. Go to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go free." Moses was afraid, but God said, "I will be with you." So Moses went to Pharaoh. "Pharaoh," Moses said, "God says." "God?" said Pharaoh. "Never heard of him." Moses kept going. "God says, let his people go free." "Why should I?" Pharaoh said. "Don't want to." "Won't." So he didn't. So God gave Pharaoh 10 warnings called plagues. First, God turned the river Nile into blood. Ew. No one could drink the water. But still Pharaoh would not let them go. So God made frogs come hopping and leaping and jumping. In your bed frogs, in your hair frogs, in your soup frogs, all over, everywhere frogs. You see all those frogs? "Make them go away," Pharaoh screamed. "Then your people can go." So God took the frogs away. But Pharaoh changed his mind. "You can't go," he said. Then God sent zillions of gnats. You see all those gnats up here. Nasty gnats flying in your face and getting into your mouth and ooh, gnats. But still Pharaoh said no. So then God sent swarms of flies. Flies buzzing in your eyes, flies. Ew. And after that, sickness and horrible boils and huge hailstorms and a storm of locusts and then darkness when it should have been day, until it seemed that the whole world, creation and everything was coming undone, falling back into darkness and emptiness and nothingness. Oh, what trouble in the world. But each time Pharaoh said, "Make it stop and then I'll let them go." And each time when God made it stop, Pharaoh changed his mind again. "Actually, no, you can't go," he'd say over and over and over again. Finally, Moses warned Pharaoh, Obey God, or he will have to send the worst thing of all. Pharaoh just laughed at him. So God said, the oldest boy in each family of Egypt must die, but my people will be safe. God told his people to take their best lamb and to kill it and put some of its blood on the front doors. When God passes over your house, Moses explained, God will see the blood and know that the lamb died instead of you. That night it was just as God said. Suddenly, piercing the darkness, echoing down the corridors of the palace, came a blood-curdling scream. Pharaoh's oldest son had died. At last, Pharaoh did what God said. Get out, he said. Go, get out of here. And so, that very night, see, there's God's very big family. That very night, Moses and God's people fled out of Egypt and out of slavery. They were free at last. God's people would always remember this great rescue and call it Passover. But an even greater rescue was coming. Many years later, God was going to do it again. He was going to come down once more to rescue his people. But this time, God was going to set them free forever and ever. And we know who the story is talking about now, right? He's talking about Jesus, who set us free. My young friends, God wants to rescue all of us from the trouble that we face. And sometimes we have to just say, okay, you go, God, I'll follow you. It's when we resist God that we get into trouble. Pharaoh resisted God, and he paid the ultimate price. He lost his son. I hope that when God tells you to do something, like to mind your parents, or to be kind, or to tell the truth, or to take good care of your body, I hope that you will obey God and do what God says so that you will have life. I hope that you will be blessed and be well and know that you are beloved this week. Goodbye, and we'll see you next Monday.